we're going to discuss the challenge of zoning codes. What is different about zoning code and land use code content in particular? I also want to quickly cover, why listen to what a codifier has to say about zoning code, being that, we're not per se subject matter expertise in zoning or land use codes. That's definitely the purview of planners and zoning practitioners and attorneys, perhaps. But we do have a perspective, and we get to touch so many codes. We do believe we have some valuable perspectives on zoning codes. I want to quickly cover some zoning topics that are driving some of these changes, specifically in how we publish, share, and access zoning codes. Some really timely, fresh things. Share sort of those as a heads up as to what to look out for that you might want to consider some publishing changes in the way that you present your codes based on some of the topics that are new on the zoning front. I'm going to cover specifically some digital solutions that we know work, that we've seen results and are really working for our clients. I do at the end want to cover avoiding some solution pitfalls that we've started to see as people try to navigate many different options in how to present zoning and land use code information to constituents. Some things to consider as you perhaps change the way that you think about presenting the zoning code to the public. And then finally, we'll have the wrap up, the Q&A and discussion. So we'll get started with a very brief background in how did we get started in zoning. Modern zoning basically dates back to 1916, specifically in New York City, passed as a response to a 42-story building called the Equitable Building in Lower Manhattan. This building, being one of the early skyscrapers, literally cast a shadow on its neighbors. So it really was one of the first fights that people had about property rights and involving the built environment around them. So the 1916 zoning resolution really was about managing dimensional requirements. That in particular with building codes, it really was sort of a hybrid building code and only managing physical characteristics of the built environment to limit things like coverage, height, different things, room sizes, setback distances, the dimensional requirement portions of what we see that has continued on to modern zoning today. Now, today, zoning regulations have become increasingly complex and somewhat difficult, frankly, for property owners to understand and interpret. And that's because codes today have tackled a much wider set of challenges beyond just building footprints and dimensional requirements. They're addressing quality of life issues. They're involving things like technology, social inequities, changes in property usage, environmental concerns, and much more weighty topics. Zoning codes are being written and modified to reflect aspirations of communities. How they want to change the living experience of residents there and how they want the built environment to appear, much wider than just the physical limitations or the dimensional requirements, like I said before, but really about how people are living and experiencing a community and experiencing a sense of place. This has resulted in significantly larger, more complex codes. At the same time, there's been a strong movement toward user-centered government. Local governments in the business of promoting the public good and such plans and zoning codes that tend to be intimidating and hard to decipher, even for staff, really create a roadblock for users. For a long time, resident customers, I like to think of my residents or constituents as customers because I think we can learn a lot from businesses. In many cases, they've accepted lackluster performance from government that has really lagged behind what they've experienced with businesses that they do business with. And that's no longer acceptable. We have to keep in mind, we have an entire generation, actually you could make the argument 2 generations now, that have lived their entire adult life accessing every bit of information they need from devices like this, digitally. They're used to accessing information immediately. And frankly, we cannot ask them to go backwards. We have to go forward. So we have to think about designing our codes and development processes that involve this public. We have to think like business executives or highly successful local retailers in your communities. Think about how they're taking care of their users and how they're innovating to provide better customer service. So in why listening to what a codifier has to say, the most powerful thing I can say is because we get to host over 4,000 codes in 42 states, we get to see analytics on searches, for example, on municipal codes. And when I say municipal code, I mean the entire code, not just zoning and land use. We have learned over time that 70 to 80% of all municipal code searches specifically involve zoning or your land use code or your development codes. That's really powerful, and it's a message to municipal governments to tell them that more than just the clerk or whomever's responsible for working with a codifier or somebody who publishes the code, more roles should be involved, because there's more roles than just the person whose responsibility it is to host the code. It touches far more people and far more departments in a municipality, and there's far more interest in what the code says and how it says it to the public. So I like to acknowledge that there has been a separation in the past. There is a gap sometimes between the people who write zoning codes and are responsible for updating them and maintaining them. There's a gap between those folks and the people who are responsible for publishing them, keeping them up to date as far as from a publishing perspective. So it's my goal to connect these two groups. And I encourage you, if there's anything you can do to reach out to different groups who have a say and have a place in the development process, to get them involved in decisions that are made regarding, the processes around the development process and hosting code and those decisions. Let's bridge that gap. So now we'll turn the page to some zoning topics that are driving change. I'll share some of those hottest and most common trends. But first of all, as we get into these, some frameworks, some guidelines, don't wait until somebody challenges your ordinance or until there's an issue. If you start getting those legal challenges, or you start waiting for the flood of complaints to come in, you will have waited too long. Get ahead of this. Keep an eye out for some of these trends, and try to start thinking about the service end of how you can make some of these rather complex issues a little more simple to access and understand. If you're asked repeatedly about a topic that's not addressed in your zoning code or a confusing part of your zoning code, bring in folks who are associated with that, who's ever responsible for drafting rules, boards, town members. Get a group together and start talking about that, pass that on, give that feedback. To be proactive, you want to include the appropriate language in the zoning ordinance to make sure that your staff isn't wasting time answering questions and providing a not so great experience for your constituents. So some of these topics that are driving change, we are definitely seeing just a huge trend in the adoption of form-based codes or mixed-use codes, where the goal is really placemaking. Things like special downtown districts with form-based or mixed-use regulations. These codes favor the use of photographs, illustrations, and unique layouts, tables. Planners typically spend a lot of time and resources producing these well-designed ordinances. They have great layouts, great artwork, well thought out tables to convey information. We really need to make sure that there's enough money budgeted to make sure that we're communicating them to their maximum extent. We want to optimize the presentation of these codes, because many times more money actually goes into the creation of these documents than in publishing them. Publishing them is a very small percentage of the overall budget. But a lot of times that portion of it is overlooked, and you end up with a document that sits and is not used by as many people as well as it can be. So if you're aware of planning consultants, the board, any activities where anybody's actively developing a new zoning code, or any content that will go into the code that contains a significant amount of illustrations, tables, photographs, any of these non-text type ways of communicating information, have a conversation with your codifier. Let us know as soon as possible. It'll result in a far better looking and functioning zoning code for you. Accessory dwelling units, very hot topic right now. Where are they allowed? What zones, dimensional requirements? Are they allowed by right, conditional use, special exception? Are there restrictions by occupation on family members? Can you rent them out? If so, which zoning districts, where can they be located? Multifamily versus single family residential. We see a lot of this work going into codes right now. Relatedly, but a little bit different in some cases, tiny homes. What are minimum dimensions? Lot sizes are sometimes affected. What are community requirements? Do they have to be built on permanent foundations, or can they be on wheels? And do wheels make them a mobile home, which is a different consideration in many land users zoning codes. So that's definitely a topic to look out for. Another huge one right now is reduction or elimination of single family residential zoning. That is looking to be replaced by multifamily residential zoning, or sometimes mixed use. Upzoning is the term, so there's a buzzword to keep an ear out for. Started mainly in urban areas, but as quickly we see across our client base, quickly working out into more suburban and even some village rural settings, mainly due to generational housing preferences. That in changing economic conditions as they evolve are really going to drive this change in housing preference or purely need. Backyard animals, always a big topic in a codifier's office. As somebody who hosts 4 goats and 8 chickens at my house, this is one that I'm close to. Definitely in the past more prevalent in rural areas, but now we're seeing it more and more in village settings, more urban areas. Sometimes right to farm laws covered those in more rural settings, but we're seeing it in more urban areas now. We all know the stories about how expensive eggs have gotten. All kind of considerations in zoning codes involving minimum lot sizes, sexes of animals allowed, roosters, are they allowed, are they not allowed? Size limits on the structures, setbacks, things like that affect zoning code. Wireless communication towers, 5G technology in particular, because this used to be limited a lot to as a NIMBY, a not in my backyard issue. But now there are a lot more public concern over possible health issues. That's because 5G technology comes in much smaller scale structures, lower to the ground. There's issues with proximity to historic buildings in certain parts, so there's definitely an impact on many zoning codes. Green energy, solar, wind, residential and community solar applications. Typically, this is a view shed issue in the zoning code. Those tend to be the biggest concerns, a little bit of a NIMBY issue, but there are also human and animal safety concerns as well that affect zoning codes. In the last few years, marijuana consumption and sales has gone from just, medical use marijuana to recreational adult use. Many communities, there's issues with opting in, opting out. This is all dependent on how marijuana is handled at the state level. So it's different in every community, but communities, if they haven't already, should be thinking about how that affects their zoning code going forward. Non-traditional uses in agricultural zones is huge. I know most of our participants today are from the Midwest. This is definitely going to be the same as we experience here in Western New York, which has a lot of agricultural land. The fact of the matter is that many farmers are looking for unique ways to generate more revenue from their existing facilities. And there's a desire for urban people to experience agricultural areas in different ways than just traditional farming practices. So things like wedding venues, cideries, wineries, retail stores, agricultural equipment repair facilities, things like welding services, repair shops, restaurants in agricultural areas. And then I'll end it with short-term rentals. I can't imagine many communities where this has not come up already, but it's probably the largest driver of changes we've seen over the last year in zoning codes has been the addition of language around short-term rentals. Perceived problems, things like loud parties, non-residents without adequate services, potentially illegal activity, parking issues. There have been many court cases around this use. So many impacts to zoning codes, which districts would make the most sense for your community, making certain your zoning code defines what short-term rentals are. We've seen a lot of activity in zoning codes about this. And we have some emerging topics to watch. So things that are a little farther out, but things you definitely want to keep your eye on that are going to be impacting zoning codes. Specifically with the pandemic, changing allowable uses for retail. Many businesses went under during the pandemic. There have been changes in use in retail areas. We've seen a reduction in demand for commercial office space. What does the zoning code allow for reuse in those cases? Malls and plazas shifting to online shipping hubs, Amazon type activities. Accessory uses at home, people leaving traditional office and business spaces and trying to take their businesses home, sort of going back to the days of hanging the shingle and providing professional services out of your home. Aerial drone and autonomous delivery vehicles, electric vehicle charging stations, parking. And then one that just came up in New York, came out of the governor's State of the State address. Affordable housing legislation is a hot topic facing many states. And regarding zoning code, there will definitely be an impact on zoning codes going forward. So with those topics coming, some solutions that we've seen clients employ that have really helped clearly communicate these codes in non-traditional ways. The first is the use of graphics, tables, illustrations, and color coding. And that's because a picture is truly worth 1,000 words. Graphics, tables, and illustrations make it far easier for users to access very detail-rich zoning codes. Tables in particular make accessing this type of information much, much faster. If you literally measure how quickly you can find a particular value, if you use tables, that's something we've measured internally, and it's something that definitely works rather than having to read through text, the written word. We've seen well-formatted tables become the clear #1 way that communities can make their zoning codes more quickly understood and accessed. And we encourage clients to think ahead and plan how your graphically rich zoning code will be published. Again, I mentioned earlier, if you're going down this road of creating a code like this, make sure you're thinking about how this will be published and shared going forward. So General Code calls the services that we've created to host these types of codes. We call this enhanced graphics. There have been many different tools available. This first one, is out there. We've really upped our game as far as our skills and our technology available in-house to replicate these types of graphically rich codes. And the thing important for clients is we see far fewer changes over time to codes that employ the use of these graphics and tables and layouts versus text-heavy codes. If you think about if you missed a particular word, there are words added far more frequently to text-heavy codes than these codes. When we've seen them switch and become graphically rich, we've actually seen the total number of changes in a year on average decrease as communities have added tables and illustrations and photographic examples to their codes. So let me jump over quickly and give you a quick show in eCode 360. So I want to show you a few of our clients' codes. Holland, Michigan has a fantastic graphically rich code. And really what I'm showing is the document when it first came to us as an adopted ordinance was fantastic. And essentially what we did was not change that, not change the layout, not change the look and feel of this code from the well thought out tables, the color coding, the thoughtful color coding, the iconography. We kept that intact. As I scroll through the code, you can see all of the original color coding, the well-designed tables, the thoughtful layout. We basically retained this. We kept this in place, And even though we did what a codifier does in adding numbering, changing the structure, making sure that the code would be scalable over time, providing things like historical references, we didn't alter the look and feel of the code. That was really, really important to that client. I'll show you another just to demonstrate. It really doesn't matter that they're general code codes. Each of these codes retains its unique features. Port Chester, New York, again, great plan view diagrams of how to measure things like setbacks, buffers, fantastic iconography, callouts, very clear tables, color coding throughout. Just a really great looking code with photographic examples that show users what what certain defined architectural styles or uses look like in their town. So great job by Port Chester. Clifton Park is another classic. Clifton Park did a great job, again, using tables, color coding to convey information. Great illustrations, high quality illustrations, great tables with call outs. These are some of the consistent, you'll see these consistent methods from code to code on how to convey this type of information clearly. Just a great job by everyone. And when you show these types of codes in a tool like eCode 360, an advantage you get over something like a PDF is the ability to, if I search on a term like shopfront, if I go and look at the code, you're always going to expect that in a text search. But if I've prepared a code like this using enhanced graphics tools, that allows shopfront to show up with a photographic example. So it's really a powerful way to use the powerful search in eCode 360 to actually start to find images that also define certain terms in the zoning code. So another solution that we know works is online maps, interactive zoning maps. So General Code offers an interactive zoning map tool called Maplen. And this is the Mapling site for the city of Kalamazoo, Michigan. What this does is it allows users who I mentioned before, users are used to using maps every day to find where they're going on mobile devices. I think we've become much more geographically oriented as people because of things like Google Maps, Apple Maps. It allows a view into your zoning code in a curated way where General Code is able to take the subset of zoning code, the 80% of essential elements, if you will, in a zoning code, and present it through an interactive map to help users answer the most asked questions like where can I put my business or what can I do with my property very quickly and easily through an interactive zoning map. For example, if we're looking at Kalamazoo right now, all of the zoning districts are on. If we search for, let's say I'm a developer that wants to come into Kalamazoo and build a car wash, where can I put a car wash in Kalamazoo? If I click on that use, you can see all the zoning districts disappear where that's not an allowed use. And I can now, if I'm looking for property, I can now zoom in on properties where that is an allowed use. So I can get down in close and look at one of these properties. I can find out information like who the owner is, what the address is. I can find out special things immediately in my zoning code, which base district, but also what overlays. General Code builds these sites and puts all of the zoning code information into it so that when things like overlay districts change the regulations on a particular parcel, we're able to report out specifically to that parcel what is the zoning. We're taking all the guesswork out or all of the calculation work out of having to decipher by reading the entire code. So we can create a parcel detail page and we can create this subset of zoning code that just shows the viewer only the zoning code that applies to that parcel. So I can get the interactive zoning details like dimensional standards. I have the dimensional standards that apply Anything that the overlay districts might have done, like maybe limit building height or increase building height, are going to be reflected here. They don't have to worry about what happens elsewhere in that zoning district. We can look at allowable land uses. And again, we can get more details about putting a car wash in Kalamazoo. We can go down through, look at the development requirements. We can understand those development requirements a little more. In this case, we can go right on through and see we need a special use permit to put a car wash in. I can click on procedure details and I can learn more about procedure details. If you have permitting software, you can link to permitting software straight from here. So it's a great tool that really speeds access to the zoning code. It's proven. Our clients who have gone with MapLink and Zoning Hub have reported back on average, they save between 20 and 40 hours a week in answering the most basic zoning questions from the public. So that's a huge time savings for their staff. It's a really big win for our clients. Another solution we know that works is hosting comprehensive plans nearby the zoning code. So if you put your comprehensive plans in, I like to say that comprehensive plans are sort of the why behind our zoning regulations. So we have a client who does a great job with this. Comprehensive plans are all posted using public documents, which is available in eCode 360. If you have any questions about any of these features, any products you see, feel free to reach out to me or your regional account manager, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it. This particular client does a great job putting all planning documents that support the zoning code go in, such that if we search their code, we can click on any of those and open the document. But if I search on a topic that may appear in either the zoning code itself or the comprehensive plan, for example, if I were interested in more detail about buffers, if I did a search, you'll see that not only am I returning results for the code, but I'm also returning results that are in the public documents. So if I go down into public documents and I filter by type and I want to look at what it says in the comprehensive plans, a powerful online portal like eCode 360 allows me to go find information in the comprehensive plan. If I looked at the zoning code and had confusion around buffers, what do they do? Why do we have them? I can actually go to the comprehensive plan and drill right into that comprehensive plan and go find that information that I need. So co-locating those documents is a great strategy for helping your community understand your zoning regulations a little better and understand those supporting comprehensive plans that lay out what those regulations are. It really helps answer that why question. Another solution that works, custom local building codes. So General Code is part of the International Code Council. Any community that uses iCodes can potentially benefit from custom local building codes. Many of you know that on the code enforcement side, code enforcement officers are often carrying around multiple books. They may have their iCodes under one arm and then a subset of their municipal code under another arm. They're often making copies of the municipal code and creating dog-eared or sticky noted notebooks that are sometimes out of date or hard to keep up to date. Just wanted to let you know that General Code can help actually marry those two. Because of being a part of the ICC, we can actually take the iCodes, present them digitally in Digital Codes Premium online platform, and actually take your locally adopted amendments to those iCodes and bake them right into one digital presentation online so that the public or staff can access that information quickly and easily. Another solution that we know works is mobile search and responsive design. So recent municipal government software research indicates that a majority of users under the age of 50 now use mobile devices more than desktop computers to access mobile services and information. So the lesson there is that any information you provide really should at least look as good, and you should probably even flip the switch like General Code has to go with a mobile first design philosophy that says that we actually are designing first for mobile devices, tablets, phones, because that content has to be available on those devices. And over time, that percentage of users who expect to use that municipal information on devices is only going to increase. Sharing code references through social media is another great way of sharing that information, what's going on with your zoning code. eCode 360 has a great means of doing this. So if I'm in my municipal code, if I were in my zoning, I had some zoning topics to share, I can share them via Facebook, Twitter. I can go right to my linked Twitter account, send out information. You can direct your constituency right to sections in the code that are changing, any hot topics. We have a lot of folks that are using this capability. Use that social media. It's a great tool for getting the word out there about zoning code changes and zoning code content updates. Digital permitting applications. What I want to say here is if you're currently on paper and you're fully in a paper workflow, look to make incremental changes. I understand budgets. I understand scale. I am an appointed public official in a small community, population less than 5,000. Make small goals. Start in increments. If you're on paper, go to a PDF online. Try PDFs, get PDFs posted. We did that in my community. We have PDFs posted. People can print, fill out, bring in physically. If you're at the PDF point, try to get to where you can fill out forms online. If your community is larger, there are some great affordable online permitting and application softwares out there. If you offer that full service online, you're doing great. Feel free to reach out to me. Again, your account managers. ICC has some great access to these tools. Both General Code and ICC also offer APIs. So if you have any of these tools, or you're planning on any of these tools, reach out to us and let us know, because we can actually provide you with an API that makes building out one of these sites where you have to manually, in many cases, cut and paste municipal code information out of your zoning code. Instead of manual cut and paste operations, we can provide you with an API that can provide you either ICC iCode or General Code hosted municipal code information dynamically updated through the API. So let us know if you're looking at bringing any of these permitting solutions, citation software, code enforcement software. Reach out and let us know, and we can get you that API to get you really efficient, cost-effective access to your code. Now I get to the point where I say, because of many of these changes in zoning code, changes are coming at us fast and heavy. Technology is changing quickly. Want to give you a couple words of caution, just some things to be aware of and think about if you have well-intentioned changes that you're making in how you're hosting codes. The first is about PDFs, because that is definitely the biggest area I see where people think that they're making a huge positive change in going to a PDF. I say this with my background in graphic design. I'm a huge fan of PDFs. I'm gonna put the disclaimer out there. I've used PDFs heavily. They're great at what they do, which is guaranteeing that page layouts look exactly the same, regardless of what device, computer, platform, fonts you have, to make sure those documents look the same on any devices. That's why PDFs were created. They also have great layers of security for doing things like contracts, signing contracts, DocuSign. They're great for that. However, that being said, they do have limited search capabilities compared to a full-featured code portal like eCode 360. They force users, if you decide to host your codes as PDFs, yes, you can control some of the layout easily, but It also forces users of the code to master a new set of tools and functionality versus the whole code using the same tool online. You have to manage those files in different locations. So you'll have some links to access PDFs. You'll have your municipal code somewhere else if your zoning code is hosted as PDFs. It can be a confusing experience for users. Scrolling and zooming on mobile devices with PDFs is an absolute horrible experience. Large file sizes are problematic for folks that don't have the fastest internet connections or Wi-Fi. PDFs also lack some of the archiving tools, the disposition lists. That's where ordinances can be found in codified content. Managing links and references, managing those broken links, version control issues are all challenges that tools like eCode 360 have solved over time. If you move to a PDF to host your zoning code simply to retain some of those graphic characteristics that you like, it's an unnecessary, I think it's an unnecessary sacrifice. That's why I said, have a conversation with your codifier, see how their publishing technologies and abilities have changed in-house. And I know for sure, I can tell you general code can match that look and feel you want for your zoning code without giving up some of the really great functionality that eCode 360 has. Lastly, DIY codification solutions. Anything do-it-yourself, make sure you have the time and resources that you think, in making that decision to go to do-it-yourself codification. It's more difficult than it looks. Just really make sure you have those resources. Just a quick change in staff turnover can really change your level of expertise. Just one or two people can make all the difference in the world. We know of a client who, rather than, take on some rather minor costs with enhanced graphics, decided to hire a graphic design person because they had a big development project coming in and made significant changes to their zoning code. The development project ended up falling through, and now they had a full-time employee. It would have been much better for them to just take on some really small increases in costs with the enhanced graphics that would have made their zoning code look great without all that additional overhead of an employee. If you think of any questions or you'd like to have any follow-up discussion, I'm definitely available for that. So you see my email address on the screen right now, wchilds@generalcode.com. I would be happy to have a conversation about anything we talked about today or anything related to it. If you are a general code customer and you want any info about any features or services you saw today, you can either reach out to me or your regional account manager. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know how busy everybody is, and I really appreciate you taking time out to spend it with us in attending today's webinar. So thanks a lot and have a great day.